So what I'm going to do is do a bit of an update on where we are with the reinvention of research in NGA, and also talk about AI, machine learning, and automation, which seems to be a hot topic for some reason. Okay, so next, please. Okay, so reinvention, we began about a year ago. It's continuing. Great people. We're emphasizing, increasing the emphasis on low TRL, low readiness level, and of course the Hallmeyer questions. So if any of you haven't run across the Hallmeyer questions yet, happy to discuss them with you. I know that so folk inside research are finding them a little hard to deal with, because one of the little secrets of the ARPAs, DARPA and IARPA, is that more programs, more research ideas fail because they can't answer the Hallmeyer questions well than they do during execution. It's a very thorough vetting process. So also inside research, we took a very aggressive stance on transition, not just doing the R&D, but also taking ownership of moving it across into use. And that's a big deal. And we have some great examples now in safety navigation, GEOINT services, and other places. We have results also in the various research pods shown up here on the right. Those are the 7 that we started out with across all areas, including things like food security and cyber, where cyber meets geospatial. Turns out to be a very rich space for research to play. And of course, NGA is one player in the national security business. And from an R&D perspective, we're fairly small. And when you look beyond R&D into the international R&D community, which is where NGA has led us, has helped develop the whole geospatial community worldwide, it's a huge, rich space to play. And we invest heavily. We encourage, push, reward, work with others. Next, please. Now, inside research, we have the research pods, which is where the focus takes place for the lower TRL work. And we also have these functions, which I just want to mention. Research and technology protection, the best practice that we've brought over from ODNI and IARPA, is how we, as a group in the security business, say, well, that's an interesting idea. Is that classified? Is it not classified? What can we do in the open and tap the most smart people and ideas in the world, and what needs to be behind the wall? And there's a whole process for doing that, and it's been discussed in public. There's no secrets to it itself, but it becomes the risk acceptance, and if appropriate, will come with a classification guide and other types of things to help protect it. The last thing you want to do is go talk about that really hot, really clever idea in public. And then 5 years down the road, discover that maybe you shouldn't have done that. It's too late. Another one from this slide, In-Q-Tel. I know we have some folk here from In-Q-Tel. They've been a great partner. In many senses, they're very useful. They're continuous, in Hallmeyer speak, Hallmeyer 2. They're continuously watching state of the art in small businesses and technologies of interest to us. And through them, we invest and help to vet technologies to bring them into NGA. And lastly, the thing I want to touch here is mechanisms. We have a lot of vehicles available to us for people in schools and industry and elsewhere in the government to work with us jointly. And we exercise all of these. Over the next year or so, this will increase as we have more flexibility to do those things. Now, lastly, and this is a segue to the next slide, please. We are very, very carefully not an ARPA. When I spoke in GEOINT last year, we were just getting underway with the transformation. And one of the points I made was that we have a lot of good people. We have junior scientists through more senior scientists. And part of what we're doing is encourage them, helping them to grow as scientists, giving them experience, giving them responsibility, and so on. The ARPAs, on the other hand, DARPA and IARPA, You go there as a pretty much fully fledged program manager. You run something for 3 or 4 years and you leave. And that's how the ARPAs institutionally are designed to stay on and drive the leading edge of technology and science in their particular fields. We're not doing that. So what I said at the beginning of this reinvention process is that we're going to use these pods as an ephemeral mechanism. So nothing lives forever. And every year or so, we'd take a look and decide if we needed to add another focus, bifurcate something, close something down. And what I'm showing here is we have an interesting font issue, but GEOINT assurance is a new area of work for us. This is in keeping with the theme of emerging threats. In a world in which everybody has access, or almost everybody has access to the highest technology in areas of interest to us here in this room, how do we ensure that we always provide the advantage to our folk? That's a lot of understanding, it's protection, and so on. So that's a new mechanism. It's an 8th pod, and it's formed by splitting up and rearranging some of the pods that we already have. So no growth in that sense. Next, please. Now, I'm going to talk about a powerful technology, as Chris alluded to, and I'm sure everybody in the room has had at least one briefing from people within their organizations, or is working it themselves, or has read the press releases, and so on. And a little while ago, USGIF did a workshop in AI and machine learning, and I gave a talk there, and my subtitle of my talk was Hype Cycle Whiplash, because I've been around the AI and machine learning game now for far too long, since the early 1980s, when Simon and Newell were still in full operation. And so a little skeptical. We've seen the waves, we've seen expert systems and so on come through. But now it's different, right? Because we're all telling our senior managers, the decision makers, that we have the data now. We have labeled data. We have a lot of compute. And we have that neural net thinking, those technologies that have been actually developed back in the 1980s or even a little earlier that are now applicable and can be used. And from a manager's perspective, this is great, because now we can say we don't need the priests and priestesses to be in there massaging data to make things work. And in some cases, and in the early wins, that's true. All credit to everyone who's been there doing that. And what I'm going to get to in a few minutes is to talk about some of the issues that Google has identified. It was a paper they published that really clarified for me some of the limitations we're starting to face. So quickly, some examples. Those books on the right side of the screen, those are published in 1985. There are 3 volumes. Okay, so this field's been around for a while. A lot of history, hence the academic component to it. Talk about games. So most recently, AlphaGo. The big game before that made the news was Deep Blue. And if you were paying attention way back, there was a guy called Samuels who built a checkers game on a big IBM system. Now, in all those cases, huge wins, right? They are doing great work. They are also examples of narrow AI, very narrow. They work in constrained spaces. You pretty much know all the information that you need to know. It's a safe space. The simulators are absolute and deterministic, and so on and so on. And we can do great things. The AlphaGo guys did awesome work, bringing together 4 or 5 very different pieces of the AI machine learning toolbox, and did an outstanding job. So that's where we are with that. Before that, the Deep Blue game, that was hardware. There was no deep learning or machine learning involved in that one. It was purely move generation and search tree exploration. Again, a previous wave of AI to make those things happen. And now we've seen expert systems come and go. We discovered how brittle they are. and I'm going to come back to that theme in a moment too, the brittleness of constructed systems. We're seeing great success with biometrics, with language recognition, and influenza trends. Remember that one too, because I'm going to come back to it. And now with cars, self-driving cars, there's a mixture of technologies coming to bear, some of which are coming from AI and machine learning. So now we absolutely are moving into the real-time and safety aspects of these applications, and people feel comfortable enough to do it, given all the risk that comes with that. So clearly, there's a lot we can do in the NGA space with this to work, and as NGA and all of us are data challenged, so the more we can bring these tools to bear for the classifier, for the basic components, the better off we're going to be. Again, the theme underlying this is that we don't have the deep knowledge yet in these systems. They're all still relatively shallow, and that's an issue. So next, please. Automation. Automation is a word that I've used, we've used, I'm sure everyone here has. What we actually mean here is something closer to augmentation. So in the context of NGA, producing foundation data, structured observation management, and full motion video analytics, what we're talking about is not replacing the people, but taking away the drudge, helping them deal with the volume and be analysts, helping them bring that deep tacit knowledge that they have to the party, and not have them sit there and stare at screens waiting for something to happen because we haven't got the tools in place to offload that piece of the puzzle for them. So AI machine learning is showing great promise in doing this. We're likely to have some surprises. I'm optimistic this time around for the reasons mentioned before, the compute, the lot of training data, the enormous cadre of people coming out of the schools, both skilled in statistics and in data science and in the potential and the foibles of machine learning and AI. And next slide, please. And the Pentagon agrees. So these are from press releases made by the DepSecDef. These are enormous, aggressive pushes in the application of machine learning, AI machine learning, into warfare, algorithmic warfare. And we are fully involved in helping to support this succeed. Next slide, please. Now some issues. I always feel like Cassandra when I do one of these talks, but she was right, just by the way. A few words of caution. The theme is there's no free lunch. So we have some examples on here. Those same technologies are available to everybody worldwide. We have to differentiate, and we can't stop differentiating in our application and understanding of those things. But the novel software is coming out mostly out of schools and research labs, wasn't engineered to be secure. So if you're going to embed it in a safety critical system, you need to take a look at it perhaps to understand what's going on. That's true for both the data, for the training sets that are used, and so on. It's a complex business once you actually put it into play beyond just games. The example on the right is a panda to you and I. To a machine learning algorithm is a gibbon, because this is the example from a Cornell paper. You take the original image, you and I with our tacit knowledge of wildlife that just mopes around in trees and eats bamboo, see it's a panda. And up front, the trained systems trained on ImageNet say it's a panda as well. You go in and monkey with some of the low order bits in each pixel, and to the machine learning classifier, it's now a gibbon. To you and I, with all the knowledge, again, the tacit knowledge that we bring to the party, it still looks like a panda. Point being here that for machine learning is really, really dumb. Okay? There is no intelligence in it. It's purely about the pixels, and we have to be really careful how we put these things to use both for accidental and potentially intentional ways that we could make some very serious mistakes. Now, we have limited training data for some things, and this is the point here. So if I'm talking about cats or pandas or gibbons or other things, there are a lot of images out there to help train and get labeled and train with. If I'm interested in a very special vehicle that has maybe only appeared on a camera once, then that's a different story, right? Because I don't have any training data. There's a whole field of low-shot learning to help us deal with that. So there's some approaches. Looking down from above, whether it's with radar or electro-optical from air or from space, that's not where most of the effort has gone in the past. There are some companies doing good work, and we're working with them. But by and large, it's not been solved to the same extent. So this SpaceNet is an example of a project driven by Inquitel, NVIDIA, Amazon, and Digital Globe, in which we're participating to help to change that. They have challenges, they're putting up data, we're providing them labeled data sets, and so on. And there's a really good, they're running really good blogs and open analytics against that too. Lastly here, the success and failure. I mentioned some examples, really not well understood. There's a lot of theory, a lot of experimentation to do, especially in the real world mission-critical applications that we are talking about. It's a really big deal, and there's a lot of work to get done behind the scenes. Now the big deal, the point at the bottom. This has been something that's been worrying me for a while, and there was a paper came out within the last couple of months from Google. And the term they used was technical debt, and I'll explain what that means. Way back when we did the first programs and the first computers, they were sitting in isolation, they ran by themselves, they added numbers up, they ran paper tape drives, whatever they were, and so on. And then we had the programs talking to each other, then we had the first early operating systems, then we went between machines, and so on and so on. And with all those steps, we agreed on the standards that would be used at all levels of the communication stack, from the signals on the wires or the fiber, all the way up to the highest levels of the protocols and the applications. So in the system architectural space, we've already paid the bill. When we talk about big systems, we talk about architecting systems. We talk about web services. We talk about the ontologies that are being used. We talk about the protocols that are being used. XML, when it came along and was used by OWL and DAML for web services, those are huge changes. And we still see messes there. People don't implement them the same way, so there's a validation regime and so on. All right, now think about AI and machine learning. So typically today, we use these classifiers, these narrow AI classifiers, that's what they are, on found data. So we acquire a lot of imagery from space. Now we want to run classifiers against it. We didn't collect that imagery just to do the work, right, to run the classifiers on. We did it for other reasons. And that's true whether you can say the same thing for banking transactions looking for fraud, retail operations, and so on and so on. Okay, so now I've got my classifier running over here. It's doing a great job, and it's a black box. From where you sit, you just take the output, and your black box uses mine, and these things cascade and interrelate. And now somebody over here changes the sampling mechanism, changes the statistics of some of these original collects. Where is that captured? Okay, we are building a massive technical debt that we are not writing down. We are not putting together when we start to cascade systems and interrelate them. And this is something that Google has come forward with and written a really outstanding paper. Look for Google engineers writing a paper on technical debt. As an example, a specific example for them, there was something called Google Flu Trends, which you may have heard of, So Google, a group of Google scientists was watching how people use search terms and when they use search terms and where they use them to determine and predict flu trends, influenza trends across the country. First year or so, it was really good. And after that, it didn't work. Didn't work so well. And there were papers that came out calling them on it. Turns out Google corporate, without telling the scientists, had changed the search engine parameters. So there is a very concrete example, fortunately, to do with monitoring and not a safety critical application. But that's something we as a community, again, GEOINT is just ripe for doing a lot of really narrow AI applications. We have to worry about that technical debt. And I'm just starting to get my head around it too. So I went looking. We have, if you work in manufacturing, you'll find there's a lot of process theory because they're very long, complicated supply chains. The control theory, perhaps, needs to be built in. But to my point at the beginning, there is no free lunch. We've been making these advances, and now we have to make sure that those are concrete and real and stay with us. Okay, next please. So the wrap up, the reinvention continues. We have great people. We have a lot of support within and outside the agency. We're still relatively small in a very fast moving technical world. We have to work with others, and we are. AI machine learning is a really solid hammer, this narrow use anyway. We have a lot of heavy lifting to do as a technical community, much bigger than this room, anybody working in this space, to make sure that progress isn't 2 steps forward, 1 step back, to make sure these things are concrete and are real gains. Now, I would be remiss in saying that to advertise the fact that we're always looking for people. So we have great people. I'm interested in bringing people in as IPAs, joint duty assignments, and hires as well to join the research operation. We have data. We have mission. We don't have stock options, but we absolutely do have mission. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Highnam. I think we have a few questions that are going to be coming up to the stage, but we have a few here to get started with. So can you expand on the topic, the research topic you described about where cyber meets geospatial?
Sure. So typically, when we talk about cyber, or when people talk about cyber, they talk about IP addresses or nefarious actors and so on. That's one aspect. We're very interested in NGA in actually putting a building or a room in a building to that. So we're taking it to taking it to the next level. On the other side of things, in a world where most or much of our data is coming from others, coming from other places, we need to be sure that that data is good. And that's a big piece of the puzzle. And how do you do that? How do you operate at speed? And do all the other things that we want to do. So there's a lot of flavors to this. Cyber is networking writ large, if you like, as well as the cybersecurity aspects. And there's some very promising research going on now, again, within the group as well as outside.
Very good. And then one other question. How does NGA research transition a capability into use within the production aspects of NGA?
Okay. The researcher's predecessor, an organization called Innovision, actually had a lot of transitions into use. And the more I've dug into them, the more I realized how clever people were. They didn't do something that was really far out and would require massive change. They did something that the people needed in the moment and helped to slide it into practice. So in safety and navigation, for example, air, some of the code that sits in those pads that the pilots take in the plane came out of Innovision. They found the right niche, they moved it out. Other parts of safety navigation, helping again to augment and take some of the drudge away from analysts working on the floor. That's already in play, working very closely with them. And what we did was to move both money from research and a lead, initially actually 2 leads, to work in that group. And we said we'd keep them there for up to 2 years to actually take it home. And that's the model that we're following. We're actually writing internally formal transition agreements. So I'm willing from research to move a person, typically the lead of the operation, along with some funds and with technical and programmatic goals into your piece of operations and hold it there for up to 2 years. And we have milestones, metrics. Again, how am I thinking here? If they're not being met, either side, we can walk away. This will take a little. We have 3 signed. We have another wedge of these in progress, and we're also tallying up all the things that Innovision/research has now made concrete and moved across as well. But taking ownership of the transition is a very big deal. And also working hard to remove the barrier to entry. I was an analyst in a different job, and when the tool shows up and they say, hit the red button, use the result, no, not so much. But if I'm there helping to develop it and see how it works, or if more, in the case of NGA, if new data layers, much higher quality data layers just show up behind my screens for me to use, I don't have to learn anything new. I have to learn how good or not, and how reliable this new information is, but I'm removing the barrier to entry. That's a big deal.
We have time for one more question. So this comes in from our young professionals group. What computer languages should a young data scientist learn to be able to work with NGA?
My boss says Python. But there's R, there's a ton of languages out there, and academics in the room, don't take this wrong, but as soon as industry, as soon as the government really gets used to a language and how to do something, you invent another one. and then we have to go learn it again. So I was, one of my kids is computational genetics, and he was learning Perl, which is 30 years old, because that really owns that community. Python, I'm not sure has legs, or has legs, it's around now, but I'm seeing 2 or 3 other scripting, DevOps-y kind of languages show up. But R, statistical package, or others which I won't mention because they're proprietary, and then I would be endorsing them, so I won't do that. You need to know the languages, but you also need to know what's going on behind them. I think we've all seen examples of an inability to differentiate correlation and causation. And you can do stupid in any language you want, and that's not an issue. You have to have the training, you have to have the experience and the mentoring behind that to actually do the job well.
Okay, so I've been told we have time for just a couple more questions. What is NGA doing to ensure their machine learning algorithms will not be hacked?
There's a field out there called adversarial machine learning, and the Panda was an example of that. So the academics are busy exploring ways to understand training data. What if you used training data that had, again, back to my comment about statistics, that had unintentional or intentional biases in the training? What if I know the package that you're using, or you're working against us? There's a lot of, all these things are out there in the open. That was part of my point about security. We're working hard to understand in the context of geospatial intelligence, again, but there's a far larger much richer and deeper community worrying about the math, the statistics, and these problems in general. Think about this in healthcare. It's a pervasive problem, and just as with cybersecurity, we all have to be on our best game to make this work.
Okay. These next two questions are related, so we'll take it first from a domestic approach. You mentioned that Google a couple times in the reference to your, the type of work that's being done commercially. AI and machine learning are currently a commercial use at Google, Apple, Amazon. Does NGA participate in some of those experiences with those vendors?
There's certainly a lot of conversation back and forth. Yes, they're also, they publish. Also wearing a previous hat, Google and Facebook, I don't think Amazon, actually bought research teams that we were funding from IARPA. And if Stacey comes in, you should ask her that question too. So we see from the inside, but it's very much in their interest to publish, to share their knowledge, to share what they're finding, because they also recognize that the bulk of the lift, the intellectual lift, is going to go on back in the academic world and the rest of the commercial world.
Very good. And so lastly, how will you leverage foreign research? Do you have mechanisms to identify, review, and transition research that's being done by foreign governments into something that NGA could potentially use?
At the beginning, I mentioned that there was this research and technology protection best practice that we copied wholesale, whole cloth, from IARPA. And one of the outcomes of that is that if you decide that a field is sufficiently low TRL, low technical readiness, then you don't care. You want to get the best minds that you can, wherever they happen to be, to work on that problem. And schools work with everybody all the time anyway. When we talk about open source code, when we talk about software coming from companies, especially in a field that's still as nascent and immature as AI and machine learning, we will be using those, and we are using those. But back to the comment, we have to do it with our eyes wide open, both in the sense of, or not specific to non-US, but anybody providing something into our supply chain that isn't what we want.
Okay, I do have one last question, and this may be a question for the government stage, so I'll let you defer if that's the case. What is the updated status on the IFSP Phase 2 or near-term follow-on for that?
Government stage.
Government stage, okay. All right, very good. Well, thank you, Dr. Highnam.
Thank you.